Welcome back, class, and we're going to pick up on our conversation from access modifiers and objects and talk about their uses. So, object-oriented programming, as we discussed, is all about using objects to build up a logic. And I've been defining a lot of things, but we haven't discussed how it's used. So we like to discuss that there are four main pillars of object-oriented programming, and there's a mnemonic that is commonly used to remember each one of these. API. I imagine you could rearrange them however you like, but it's important to understand that these are the four main points of using an object-oriented programming language over others. So let's discuss them one by one. We have the A, abstraction. So I will read the definition. The process of removing physical, spatial, or temporal details or attributes in the study of objects or systems in order to focus attention on details of higher importance. So, definitions are always so packed. Let's unravel this a little before moving on. It says the process of removing details when studying objects in order to focus on higher importance. So the idea of abstraction exists in a lot of places, and you probably use it without even thinking about it. If I told you to write a definition of a word, you would try and mimic the style that I use here, where I repeat the word, colon, and then try and write the definition. That template is the abstraction of how you would write the definition. So abstraction is nothing but thinking about the structure and the overarching idea to get it going. The common example used here is cars. To have a car, it needs to have an engine and four wheels and its steering mechanism, just thinking about what it could have. But we can expand these definitions to include other definitions or to just think about the idea of what is a car in general. So it's all about the general definition of an object. Next we have P, polymorphism. Polymorphism is the provision of a single interface to entities of a different type or the use of a single symbol to represent multiple data types. So what this is trying to say is that there's one point in, but it allows for many other things to use that point. So here we're discussing that if we define how something behaves, then we can allow for the definition of that behavior to be done later on. It removes the two. The idea here is, imagine if you had to discuss a classroom of students. How would you describe them abstractly? You would say, well, each student needs their spot in the class, they need their grades to be recorded, and they need ways of interacting with one another as well as with the student. With the teacher. So we could make a definition that says students do all of those things that we described, but how each one listens and interacts with one another and where they sit is completely different. We allow for that to be defined per each student or object in this case, where we just worry about the general definition of it. So a difference between abstraction and polymorphism here is that abstraction is just the general idea of anything, where polymorphism is the general idea that allows us to define behaviors later on. So, defines a common interface for an arbitrary set of individually specified types. Next we have the I, inheritance. The mechanism of basing an object or class upon another object or class, retaining a similar implementation. So this allows programmers to reuse code and not have to copy paste different definitions that already exist and just pass them down. So let's say that you have the definition for cow. That cow will graze, it will have a certain way that it looks, but when it has a calf, it's going to inherit a similar definition. It's going to look a similar way, 4 legs and roaming around, as well as it's going to graze in a similar way. So we can just use this already defined definition and apply it on descendants in their hierarchy. And then the E, which is encapsulation. Encapsulation is used to hide the values or state of a structured data object inside of a class, preventing unauthorized parties direct access to them. So this is speaking about how we can use access modifiers, or the concept behind them, to obscure and hide certain information we want to stay consistent per each object. So we just want to make sure that things stay in a certain way. So we'll put a lock on them saying, no, you can't interact with that, or only people of my hierarchy can interact with that, etc. All of these definitions you'll use without even thinking about them. But it's important to know your definition and to perform them properly. Later, we will cover this in our lab portion of this course. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.